Okay, to the debacle in Ukraine. Russian tanks rolling in while the West looks completely useless, as I showed last night. And in a second, I'll show you something about the Russian president that will make you think, how on earth do our leaders think that their sanctions, the ones announced today, are going to work on this maniac? Unless maybe they hurt one of Putin's rich cronies so much they get, they crack up and get a gun and they shoot Putin, which is probably our best hope of ending all this. Now, I saw actually Donald Trump today calling Russian President Vladimir Putin a genius, the way that Putin had played the West for suckers and invaded Ukraine like he had no fear at all. And I've got to say, heard some outrage on this station today, but it's hard to argue with Trump there or with something else that he said, which is this. I know Vladimir Putin very well, and he would have never done during the Trump administration what he is doing now. No way. All right, you might say he's bragging, but I have to say Trump has some evidence on his side. You go back to the president before him, Barack Obama, hero of the left. Now, when Barack Obama was fighting for re-election against the Republicans' Mitt Romney, he mocked Romney for suggesting that Russia was, in fact, still America's top geopolitical enemy or foe. And the media high-fived Obama for being so sassy and making Romney look so dumb and so uncool.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, the Cold War has been over for 20 years. But, Governor, when it comes to our foreign policy, you seem to want to import the foreign policies of the 1980s.
Oh, ho, ho, what a wise guy. But it only took a couple of years for Russian President Putin to make a fool of Obama by sending his soldiers to steal the Crimea from Ukraine, down the bottom of the map. That was in 2016. And pro-Russian militias also grabbed parts of eastern Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk. Now, when Trump became president, Putin did make another move. I think that's because he probably recognized, to be frank, that Trump was a bit of a thug as well. The kind of thug who understood very well how thugs like Putin thought, and probably would be crazy enough to punch Putin right back, right in the nose. Whatever. Putin did nothing until Trump was beaten and doddery old Joe Biden shambled in to become president. And now Putin sends in the tanks to eastern Ukraine, to Donetsk, Luhansk, and gets ready to invade the rest of Ukraine too. And if you reckon that's a coincidence, really? Really? A coincidence that Putin does all this when the US president now seems clueless about a man like Putin and so disengaged?
Do you think you may have underestimated Putin?
Thank you. Time to move. Thank you.
Well, he can't pick his teeth. Give the old guy that. Okay, so Biden is now saying he's imposing sanctions to punish Russia. It's going to hit some Russian banks, for instance, some Putin cronies, and he's banning a Russian pipeline bringing even more gas to Germany. And is giving, of course, all these high-sounding warnings, we've got to try diplomacy. Putin should obey the law.
Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors? This is a flagrant violation of international law.
No kidding. It's against international law. I mean, do any of these characters have the slightest idea what kind of man they're dealing with here? Putin doesn't give a stuff about international law, to put it very politely. I mean, this is a criminal who's accused of personally ordering and approving the murders of dozens of his critics, like Liberal politician Boris Nemtsov, shot dead in the street. Like Alexander Litvinenko, who accused Putin of murder and was then poisoned to death in Britain. Like crusading anti-Putin journalist Anna Politkovskaya, first poisoned and then shot. Like human rights lawyer Stanislav Markelov, who represented that woman and was himself shot. Like Sergei Yushchenkov, a popular politician, shot dead just after he registered his anti-Putin party. I could go on. There's a whole list of names. So tell me again that Putin is just the kind of guy who's going to be impressed by appeals to international law. This man is a killer. And don't expect this talk of sanctions to bother him much either. I mean, the West hit him with sanctions 6 years ago when he sold the Crimea. Do you think that stopped him? He's now back for a second slice of Ukraine, which he this week declared was actually a fake country that belonged heart and soul to Russia, all of it. See, what are sanctions? I mean, what is mere trade to this man? Now they've just got himself a palace, a super yacht. No. What Putin wants now is something much bigger, a place in history. He wants Russia to get back its empire with him as the new Tsar. He's looking at history. He's not looking at trade figures. And this, again, is one of those classic Western failures, to think that dictators and thugs and killers like Putin, China's Xi Jinping, that they share our Western values, that they want the same things. I mean, these are the kind of people who made the same mistake with Hitler. And what's more, these sanctions we heard about today, oh, good, got to do something, but Putin's had years to prepare for them. In that time, he's made his country much more self-sufficient, so the West couldn't really hurt him with sanctions. He's now got Russia to grow all its basic foods instead of importing them, so it can't be starved out. He's built alternative financial structures, critical factories. Most importantly, Putin formed a very tight partnership with Chinese dictator Xi Jinping that ties Russia to the world's biggest market and includes now a massive deal signed this month to sell China even more gas. And that makes Biden's big announcement today that US and Germany are going to stop the Nord Stream gas pipeline from Russia to Germany. Now, it's not quite the knockout he's selling. So it's all set up now for a conflict between Russia, backed by China, that's absolutely spoiling for a fight, and the West, which doesn't want one at all and doesn't even speak the language of violence. Who do you think is going to win?